What if I told you that miracles don't always fall from the sky? Sometimes they walk on two legs, carry battle scars, and return home when the world needs them most. This is the story of Marcus, a Navy SEAL who came back to a dying town, and Shadow, the warrior dog who refused to let darkness win. They faced a corrupt king, a town on the brink of destruction, and a battle no one else dared to fight, until one final act of courage turned despair into hope. If you believe heroes still walk among us, hit subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that miracles still happen. The evening fog drifted low across the valley, dimming the last traces of sunlight. Marcus Hale stepped off the old northbound bus with the quiet heaviness of a man who no longer expected warmth from the world. He paused at the base of the narrow platform, his boots meeting the cracked concrete with a dull thud that echoed through the empty station. The air smelled faintly of pine and old engine grease, familiar scents, yet somehow colder than what he remembered. Marcus was 33 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, the kind of man whose presence alone shifted the air around him. His skin carried the muted bronze of years under foreign suns, though the harsh wind of Raven Ridge now washed that warmth into ash. His hair was dark, cropped close in the disciplined style he had never abandoned, despite no longer being on active deployment. Along his jaw, faint stubble shadowed the stark edges of a face hardened by exhaustion and responsibility. His eyes, a sharp steel blue, scanned the surroundings with the instinctive suspicion of a man forged through war, always assessing terrain, angles, potential threats. That vigilance was not a habit. It was a scar left by a single disastrous mission 2 years earlier, a mission where he lost 2 teammates to an explosion he believed he should have foreseen. Their faces followed him everywhere, lingering behind his eyelids like ghosts each night, whispering the same relentless accusation. You hesitated. You should have been faster. Beside him, Shadow leaped lightly off the bus step, landing silently for a dog of his size. The Belgian Malinois was 6 years old, his fur a striking blend of sable and charcoal, muscles sleek beneath the dense coat. Shadow walked with the disciplined confidence of a trained special operations K9, his amber eyes alert, sweeping the shadows with the same suspicion Marcus carried within himself. A thin scar ran beneath the dog's left eye, a reminder of a covert nighttime mission where he saved Marcus from a hidden combatant in a collapsed building. Shadow had earned his reputation among SEAL handlers as both fearless and fiercely loyal, but trauma had shaped him too. Loud metallic echoes made him stiffen, and closed rooms made him restless. Tonight, even the quiet made him uneasy. He stayed close to Marcus's left side, every step synchronizing with the man's strides, as if tethered by an invisible loyalty. Raven Ridge had once been a lively place, small but full of the soft noise of everyday living. Now the town felt hollow. The lamps flickered along Main Street as though struggling to stay alive. Windows were shuttered even before nightfall. The air carried no laughter, no conversation, just a silence that felt intentional, as if the town itself feared waking something slumbering in the dark. Marcus adjusted the strap of the canvas duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Inside were the few things he owned: clean clothes, a knife with his father's initials from when Marcus first enlisted, and a folded flag that represented the one brother in arms he could not save. The bag wasn't heavy, but the memories were. He started walking toward the town's southern road, Shadow pacing beside him. The dog's ears flicked at every rustling branch and distant metallic groan. Marcus didn't speak to reassure him. Shadow didn't need words. Together, they moved like 2 parts of the same being, one burdened by guilt, the other shaped by obedience and faith. The road dipped slightly, giving a view of Raven Ridge nestled beneath the darkening hills. From here, Marcus could see the thin fog weaving through chimneys and rooftops. When he left 8 years ago, the place had been dotted with warm lights, people chatting on porches, kids riding bikes in lazy loops. Now those same homes looked abandoned or owned by people who no longer cared to open their doors. Marcus tightened his jaw. He never expected a hero's welcome. He hadn't been home for his mother's funeral, and though his father had never said it, Marcus knew the old man considered it a betrayal. But the military hadn't given Marcus a choice. Deployment doesn't pause for grief. His father, Daniel Hale, was a stern man, tall, bony, sun-weathered, and had been the town's only mechanic for 40 years. the kind of man whose hands were always stained with oil, whose words were sparse but meaningful. Daniel taught Marcus everything he knew about fixing engines, and everything he believed about surviving loss. But even he couldn't have understood the kind of loss Marcus now carried. As the fog thickened, Marcus passed the boarded front of McAllister's grocery. A man, maybe mid-40s, hunched in the doorway, lighting a cigarette with trembling hands. His jacket was too thin for the cold, his beard patchy, eyes darting with a mixture of caution and resignation as he studied Marcus approaching. The man straightened the moment Marcus came near, instinctively wary of the tall stranger dressed in military-like clothing. "Evenin'," the man muttered, his voice gravelly. "Haven't seen you round here before." Marcus offered a slight nod. "Just got back." "Huh. Well." The man's eyes drifted to Shadow, who stared straight back with unblinking precision. "Whatever you're looking for in this place, hope you ain't expecting much." Marcus didn't respond, but the man added quietly, "People don't stay out after dusk, not anymore." With that cryptic warning, he slipped inside the dark store and shut the door. Shadow let out a low rumble in his chest. Marcus placed a hand gently on the dog's neck. "I know," he whispered, "something's off." Shadow's ears pricked again, as a metallic bang echoed from deeper in town. Not loud, just enough to make Marcus's instincts fire awake. He looked toward the sound. A dark sedan idled on the far street, half hidden in the fog. The silhouette of a man stood beside it. For a brief moment, tall, perhaps in his mid-30s, hair slicked back, posture too confident for an ordinary local. Marcus studied the broad frame, the heavy coat, the sharp turn of the man's head as he spoke to someone inside the car. The man then stepped in and drove off without headlights. That wasn't normal, not even for a dying town. Marcus filed away the details. He didn't know this man, but his behavior had the cold efficiency of someone accustomed to being obeyed and never questioned. Someone dangerous. He exhaled and continued walking through the quiet streets. Raven Ridge's police station appeared up ahead. Lights off, windows dark except for the faint glow of a single office. Marcus remembered when the station was a place of warmth, with Sheriff Collins offering him butterscotch candies when he was a kid. Collins had died 5 years ago. The new sheriff was someone Marcus had never met. He didn't feel compelled to introduce himself. The silence of the town pressed harder the deeper he walked. No dogs barked, no televisions hummed. Even the wind seemed to tiptoe. He arrived at the Hale family home just as the moon began rising. The house was small, wooden, with peeling paint and a porch that creaked even before he stepped on it. The porch light had burned out. Marcus removed his gloves slowly, each movement careful, almost ritualistic. He reached for the doorknob and paused. Shadow stiffened first. A subtle shift in posture, the narrowing of his eyes, the slight curl of his tail downward. Marcus understood instantly. Someone had been inside. Recently. The faint scent of cigarette smoke drifted out from the cracks in the doorframe. Old smoke, but not his father's. Daniel Hale quit 10 years ago. Marcus's heartbeat sharpened, but didn't quicken. His training demanded calm, demanded methodical processing. He slipped a hand into his coat, fingers brushing the sheathed combat knife his former teammate had gifted him. With a light push, he opened the door. The house was dim, lit only by the moon slicing through the blinds. Furniture remained exactly where Marcus remembered it, but the air carried a wrongness he couldn't name. Shadow scanned every angle, muscles poised like coiled cable. Marcus stepped inside. The faint smell of oil and metal from his father's workshop drifted from the back room. But something else lingered, a scent Shadow recognized before Marcus did. Fear. Dogs trained for combat know it instantly. Shadow moved toward the hallway, pausing at the closed workshop door. He nudged it lightly. Marcus reached forward, opening the door slowly. The workshop was untouched except for a single new object, a folded note pinned to the workbench with a small screwdriver. The paper was stark against the scarred wooden surface. Marcus approached it with deliberate caution. Shadow watched the doorway. The note was written in heavy, angular handwriting. Should have stayed gone. That was all. No signature, no threat. But the message carried the weight of both. Marcus felt his jaw clench. This wasn't simple vandalism. It was targeted, deliberate, personal. Someone knew he was coming home. Someone cared enough to warn him, or threaten him. And the silence of Raven Ridge was no longer mysterious. It was suffocating. Marcus stood still for a long moment, letting the weight of the note settle. Shadow pressed against his leg, sensing the shift in his breathing. Marcus placed a hand on the dog's head again. "Looks like home missed us," he whispered bitterly. But in truth, Raven Ridge didn't feel like home at all. It felt like a battlefield waiting to rise. The ghosts he carried from distant wars suddenly felt less lonely, as if the town held ghosts of its own, ones that did not appreciate strangers returning. Marcus pocketed the note, exhaled slowly, and locked the workshop door. The night outside grew darker. The silence deepened, and the man he had spotted near the sedan earlier appeared in Marcus's mind once more. His posture, his confidence, his anonymity. Marcus didn't know why, but he felt certain. That man knew exactly who Marcus was, and he knew Marcus was back. As Marcus unpacked his final belongings upstairs, Shadow lay at the foot of the bed, eyes half closed, but ears still alert. Marcus stared at the ceiling, listening to the foreign quiet of a town he once loved. He had come searching for rest, for peace. But from the very moment he stepped off the bus, Raven Ridge had whispered a different truth, one carried on the fog and buried beneath boarded windows. The town was sick. The town was scared. And something in the darkness wanted him gone. Marcus turned to Shadow, voice low. "We're not alone here." Shadow lifted his head, confirming what Marcus already knew. Quiet returned to the room, but it was no longer the silence of an empty home. It was the silence before the first shot is fired, and Marcus Hale, whether he wanted it or not, was back in the war. The night settled harshly over Raven Ridge, the pale moon filtering faintly through the pines as Marcus Hale stepped out of his father's old house with Shadow at his heel. The cold air stung the skin of his face, sharpening his senses, making each breath feel like preparation for something he could not yet name. Marcus had barely slept since discovering the threatening note left inside the workshop. His mind churned with calculations, memories, suspicions, and shadows of instincts honed by years of combat. Someone knew he was back. Someone had stepped onto his ground, and Marcus had survived too many ambushes in foreign deserts to ignore the scent of danger when it crept around him like a slow fog. Shadow jogged slightly ahead, nose to the air, posture tight, his body language signaling unease. Marcus trusted Shadow's instincts as much as his own. The dog was a living radar, crafted by training, shaped by trauma, and sharpened by loyalty. They moved down the quiet road, Marcus scanning the empty storefronts and shuttered windows. He needed information, names, motives, patterns, and there was only one place where gossip still flowed: the Raven Ridge Diner. It stood at the corner of Alder Street, its neon sign flickering like a dying heartbeat. The inside smelled of old grease, coffee, and the exhaustion of people who had given up hope long before Marcus returned. The bell over the door chimed weakly as he stepped in. A woman looked up from behind the counter. She was in her early 40s, tall and slender, with pale skin that looked almost translucent under the diner lights. Her auburn hair was tied in a loose bun, strands falling around a face that carried lines not just of age, but of constant worry. Her eyes, gray like wet stone, widened when she saw Marcus, then softened with something like familiarity, though they had never met. On her apron was a name tag, Lena Carver. "You're Hale's boy," she said quietly, her voice gentle yet edged with fatigue. "Marcus, right?" Marcus nodded. Lena gestured toward a booth. "Sit wherever. Not many people stay out at this hour." Marcus slid into the booth, Shadow laying beneath the table, alert but silent. Lena approached with a pot of coffee, her hands slender but shaking slightly. "Your father used to come here a lot before his health got worse. He talked about you, said you were doing important things out there." Her tone held something fragile, respect, but also sadness. Marcus didn't know how to respond, so he simply said, "I came back and found someone had broken into the house." Lena froze. The coffee pot rattled against the side of the cup. "Was anything taken?" "No," Marcus said. "They left a message." He watched her carefully. "Any idea who would want me gone before I even unpacked?" Lena took a slow breath, leaning one hand on the table. Her face seemed to pale even further. "Marcus, I don't know who exactly, but you came back to a different town, People disappear now. Buildings burn down without explanation. And anyone who asks the wrong questions gets a visit from men who don't wear uniforms. Marcus's jaw tightened. Who leads them? Lena hesitated, fear flashing in her eyes. Elias Crow. The name itself felt like a shift in the room's air pressure. Marcus had never met the man, but he had seen his type before, men whose wealth was built on the silence of the scared. Marcus asked, "What kind of operation is he running?" Lena lowered her voice. "Land takeover. Fires happen on properties just before they're bought. People vanish if they refuse to sell. And Crow, he owns the sheriff. The whole department might as well be his private guard." Marcus absorbed her words, the pieces falling into a pattern that sickened him. His hometown was being devoured from the inside. "Thank you," he said. "If you hear anything—" Lena nodded. "I'll send word. But be careful, Marcus. This town chews people up now." Before he could answer, Shadow growled low, the rumble vibrating against Marcus's boots. Marcus stiffened, his eyes locking onto the diner window. A black SUV idled across the street. Two men sat inside. One, tall with a thick beard and heavy coat, had the hard-edged look of a hired enforcer. The other was clean-shaven, blonde hair sharply parted, with narrow, calculating eyes, the expression of a man who enjoyed watching others suffer. They stared at Marcus with the calm patience of hunters. Marcus met their gaze without flinching. After several seconds, the SUV pulled away. Lena whispered, "They follow anyone who asks about Crow." Marcus paid, thanked her, and stepped out into the cold. Shadow pressed close, muscles taut. "We're being watched," Marcus muttered. "Good. They'll slip eventually." They moved toward the forest at the town's northern edge. Marcus had no interest in confronting Crow yet. He needed to understand the environment, the threats, and what exactly Crow hoped to obtain through the rampant destruction. Ravenwood Forest towered before them, tall, ancient pines stretching into darkness. When Marcus was young, he spent summer afternoons playing hide-and-seek with local kids here. This forest was memory, nostalgia, but tonight, it felt like the breath of something monstrous. As they entered the tree line, the temperature dropped. Leaves rustled unnaturally. Shadow stopped suddenly, ears erect. Marcus crouched beside him, lowering his breathing until he blended into the stillness. A faint metallic noise echoed deeper in the woods, chains rattling, and then a cry. Not loud, not long, just one quick, terrified cry of a child. Marcus's blood froze. Shadow burst forward, silent as a specter. Marcus followed, dodging branches, boots pounding the cold ground. They reached a small clearing lit by a single portable work lamp powered by a humming generator, and there, tied to a tree stump with rough rope, was a boy around 10 years old. He was small, thin, with short brown hair and dirt smudges covering his pale face. His clothes were torn, his eyes wide with terror. When he saw Marcus emerge from the shadows, he flinched. "It's okay," Marcus said gently, approaching slowly. "I'm here to help." Shadow sniffed the air around the boy, checking for nearby threats. "Who did this?" Marcus asked, kneeling to untie the rope. The boy's voice shook. "The men in the black van. They said I saw something I shouldn't." Marcus loosened the last knot. "What did you see?" The boy swallowed hard. "Mr. Crow. He was yelling at men in the forest about the explosion. He said it has to look like an accident." Marcus's stomach turned cold. "Explosion where?" "The houses. The old neighborhoods near the ridge. They're going to blow them up so people have to leave." Marcus steadied his voice. "Did anyone else hear this?" The boy shook his head violently. "No. They said they'd make my family disappear too if I ever talked." Shadow nudged the child gently, sensing his panic and offering reassurance. Marcus looked around the clearing. No guards, no lookout. That was strange. Why leave a witness tied up alone? And then he understood. It wasn't that they had left. It was that they had only just realized he had escaped. Voices echoed through the forest, distant but closing in. Flashlights flickered between the trees. Shadow growled. Marcus lifted the boy into his arms. "Shadow, flank formation." The dog immediately moved to Marcus's right side, alert and ready. They sprinted through the trees, weaving between roots and fallen logs. Behind them, the men's voices grew louder. He couldn't have gotten far. Find the kid, Shadow barked once, a sharp warning. Marcus pivoted left, finding a hidden trail he used in his youth. The forest thickened around them, providing cover. Marcus pressed forward, lungs burning, muscles straining, the boy clinging to him in desperate silence. Finally, the voices faded. Only when they were far enough from the danger did Marcus set the boy down. "You're safe," he said, kneeling. "I won't let them touch you again. What's your name?" "Tommy," the boy whispered. Marcus nodded. "Tommy, listen to me. This isn't your fault. But I need you to be brave. Can you do that?" Tommy nodded shakily. Shadow licked the boy's hand gently, calming him. Marcus studied the tree line one last time, then lifted the boy again. "Let's get you home." As they walked back toward town, Marcus felt a shift inside him. Coming home had felt like punishment, but saving this child awakened something he thought had died on a distant battlefield: purpose. Raven Ridge was under siege. Innocent people were in danger. And Elias Crow was the serpent coiled at the center of it all. Marcus looked at Shadow. Things just got real. The dog wagged his tail once, ready. For the war neither had asked for, but both knew they were born for. The silence of Raven Ridge was broken, and Marcus Hale no longer intended to walk quietly. The wind swept harshly across the tree line, carrying the sharp scent of pine resin and the faint metallic bite of cold steel. Marcus Hale stood at the edge of his father's porch, the moonlight brushing across his face, revealing the tension carved deep into his features. He hadn't slept since rescuing Tommy. Every instinct inside him pulsed with the same quiet alarm. Crow's men were moving, circling, tightening their grip around Raven Ridge like a predator studying its prey. Marcus felt it in the stillness, in the strange silence of the streets, in the uneasy way the shadows clung to the corners of houses. Danger was no longer approaching. It had already arrived. Shadow paced beside him, ears alert, posture rigid. The dog had been restless ever since they returned from Ravenwood Forest, his instincts picking up the invisible threads of threat lingering around them. Marcus leaned down briefly, pressing a hand against the dog's muscular neck. "We're not done yet," he murmured. Shadow's eyes gleamed in the moonlight. Then Marcus's phone buzzed. Unknown number. The vibration felt like a whisper drawn straight from the darkness. He answered with silent caution. A distorted voice rasped urgently. "If you want answers about the fires, about Crow, go to Black Pines Lumber Mill, now, alone." The line cut off immediately. Marcus stood still, analyzing every word. The call wasn't a warning. It was bait, a trap wrapped in urgency. He felt it as clearly as he felt the winter night pressing against his hoodie. But traps had a weakness. They revealed intent. And intent could be used. Marcus looked down at Shadow. "We're going," he said. Shadow's low growl agreed. They moved quickly through back roads and dirt pathways, avoiding open streets. Marcus carried no firearms, strictly by choice. Bullets were loud. Bullets were final. Tonight required precision, not noise. His combat knife rested inside a sheath strapped against his ribs, and Shadow was its silent counterpart. The Black Pines Lumber Mill loomed ahead, its skeletal frames jutting into the night sky like the ribcage of a long-dead beast. Once a thriving sawmill, it now stood abandoned, half swallowed by thick vegetation and memories of industry long gone. The tall, broken windows stared blankly outward. The lingering smell of dust, sap, and rotting timber clung to the air. Shadow halted at the edge of the property, every muscle tightening. Marcus crouched beside him. "They're here already," he whispered. He scanned the yard, noting the faint glint of metal behind a stack of discarded logs. Someone breathing too hard, too quickly. Another silhouette shifted near the old conveyor belts. A third perched atop the loading dock roof. Marcus counted 5, no, 6, shapes moving with the stilted arrogance of armed men who believed they held the advantage. Shadow pressed low to the ground. Marcus whispered, "Flank right, wait for my signal." The dog moved, like a shadow within shadows, a silent blur weaving through debris and crates. Marcus stepped forward into the open. Footsteps rushed toward him. The first gunman emerged, a tall man with a shaved head and broad shoulders, wearing dark tactical gear. His face was rugged, with a scruffy beard peppered with gray. Cold, sunken eyes held the hardened demeanor of a man who had seen blood and grown comfortable with it. His voice snarled, "Hail! Elias sends his regards." Marcus didn't answer. The man lifted his rifle, too quickly, too sloppily for someone trained. Amateur, hired muscle, not military. Marcus lunged forward in a blur of movement. Before the gunman could react, Marcus grabbed the barrel, slammed his elbow into the man's jaw, and twisted sharply. A sickening crunch echoed as the man fell backward onto the gravel. But the sound served as a call. More men rushed out from hiding. Shadows converged. The entire lumber mill awakened. Marcus ducked behind a rusted forklift as bullets clattered against its frame. Splinters of metal flew into the air. The air filled with shouting, the chaos sharpened by the sound of someone yelling into a radio. They were coordinating. They were prepared. Elias had planned this well. From Marcus's right flank, Shadow burst out of the darkness, leaping onto a gunman who had snuck in behind Marcus. Shadow's jaws clamped around the man's wrist, forcing him to drop his weapon, then pivoted with fierce precision, pulling him to the ground. But as the dog subdued the attacker, another muzzle flash erupted. Marcus saw the danger a second too late. "Shadow, move!" The shot rang out. Shadow twisted, but the bullet caught him in the flank. The yelp pierced Marcus's heart like a blade. Rage, old, buried, familiar, ignited inside him. He moved with lethal intent. Marcus charged the shooter, a wiry man with hollow cheeks and jittery hands. The man's eyes widened as Marcus closed the distance. Marcus grabbed the gun, twisted it from his grip, smashed the butt into his throat, and swept his legs out, dropping him instantly. Bullets continued to tear through the mill. Marcus dragged Shadow behind a support beam. The dog's breathing was fast but steady. Marcus pressed his palm against the wound. Blood seeped through Shadow's fur, but the bullet had grazed muscle rather than sinking deep. "Hang on, boy," Marcus whispered. "We're not dying tonight." Shadow's eyes burned with determination, even through the pain. The dog tried to stand, and Marcus gently restrained him. "Not yet." A mocking voice echoed from the upper rafters. "Well, well, Hale's back home and already causing problems." Marcus looked up. A man stood above, illuminated by the moon. He was tall, lean, with a sharp jawline, neatly trimmed beard, and dark hair combed back. His clothing was expensive: charcoal wool coat, leather gloves. This was Silas Trent, Elias Crow's lieutenant. Known for his cruelty, feared even, by Crow's own men. Silas smiled down at Marcus, a smile cold enough to frost bone. "You really should have stayed gone. Elias had such high hopes you'd take the hint." His voice carried arrogance, but beneath it was something else, a deep-seated resentment, shaped by years of violence he inflicted rather than suffered. Silas had once been a firefighter, but after losing his wife in a suspicious accident, his morality fractured. There were rumors he blamed the town itself for her death, joining Crow's empire to burn away what he felt had betrayed him. Marcus didn't move. "You know he's going to lose," he called back. Silas laughed, stepping closer to the edge of the catwalk. "No, Marcus, we already won. You're chasing shadows while Crow is preparing a new era for Raven Ridge." He gestured grandly. "And your death will be the spark that keeps people obedient." More men surrounded Marcus now, 4, maybe 5, each armed. Marcus counted angles, distances, footing. His SEAL training kicked into cold clarity. A gunman approached too close, raising his rifle. Shadow growled weakly. Marcus struck first. He disarmed the rifle, slammed his knee into the man's solar plexus, threw him sideways, grabbing the weapon mid-fall. The others opened fire. Marcus dove behind a stack of lumber as splinters exploded into the air. Shots ricocheted dangerously. The mill vibrated with the echoes of combat. Marcus breathed in deeply, grounding himself. "Shadow, signal 3, he whispered. Despite the pain, Shadow responded with a soft growl, eyes sharp. Signal 3 meant distraction maneuver. Marcus tossed a scrap of metal across the floor. It clanged loudly. Gunfire veered toward the noise. Shadow, despite his wound, limped into deeper shadowed corners, drawing sight lines away. Marcus slid between stacks of timber, sweeping low. He took out 2 more men with brutal efficiency, one with a strike to the throat, another with a throw that sent the man crashing into a metal beam. Silas shouted. "Stop playing with him! Take him down!" Marcus grabbed a dropped flash grenade. Outdated, dented, but functional. He pulled the pin, hurled it upward. The explosion of white light shredded the darkness. Silas staggered. Marcus surged forward, climbing the ladder to the upper rafter. Silas wiped his eyes, snarling, drawing a handgun from his coat. He fired wildly. Marcus moved in zigzag patterns, his steps ghost-like on the rattling metal. A bullet grazed his shoulder, but he didn't slow. He closed in, knocking the gun aside, and slammed Silas against the guardrail. The lieutenant bared his teeth, rage and ego clashing inside his hollow eyes. "You can't stop what's coming," Silas hissed. "Crow will burn this town to the ground." Marcus struck him across the jaw, hard. Silas collapsed, unconscious. But the noise of the fight had damaged the structure. Flames from a stray flash sparked old sawdust. Fire crawled across the floorboards like a hungry creature. The mill began to groan, creak, shift. It was seconds from collapse. Marcus grabbed Silas's radio, smashed it, and hurried down the ladder. "Shadow!" The dog limped toward him, determination overwhelming pain. Marcus scooped him into his arms and ran. The fire intensified, devouring wooden beams. Smoke thickened the air as Marcus sprinted across the collapsing walkway, dodging falling debris. He burst outside just as the mill erupted behind him. A roaring inferno lit the sky, consuming everything, including the men still trapped inside. Marcus lay Shadow on the ground, kneeling, face smudged with soot. Shadow whimpered, exhausted. Marcus pressed a hand to the dog's cheek. "We're still here," Marcus whispered. Shadow pushed his muzzle weakly against Marcus's leg, not out of fear, out of devotion, out of purpose. The wind carried the scent of burning timber and the distant echo of sirens. Marcus stared back at the glowing ruins of the mill, eyes narrowed. Elias Crow had sent a message tonight, but Marcus Hale had survived worse messages before. He bandaged Shadow's wound beneath the moonlight. The dog nudged closer, laying his head on Marcus's boot. A familiar gesture, a promise, a vow. Marcus lifted his gaze to the burning remains of black pines and whispered, "This isn't over." The flames answered for him, roaring into the night sky like a warning bell. Snow lashed against the ridge in relentless sheets, the storm twisting through the valley like a living thing, its howling breath rattling branches and scraping rooftops. Marcus Hale stood at the edge of the overlook, Shadow pressed against his side, both staring toward the distant hill where Elias Crow's estate rose like a steel crown above Raven Ridge. The mansion's glass walls shimmered in the stormlight, windows glowing faintly with the warmth of luxury paid for in the suffering of an entire town. Marcus's jaw clenched. In his gloved hand, he held a flash drive, evidence he had collected from the abandoned Black Pines mill after escaping the ambush. It contained shipment logs, encrypted messages, and a diagram of the town's gas system showing exactly where Crow intended to trigger a deadly explosion. Marcus had spent the last 12 hours decrypting the files, his mind working with ruthless precision despite the exhaustion clawing at his bones. Every document pointed to one truth. Tonight would be the end of Raven Ridge if Crow wasn't stopped. Shadow pawed at the ground anxiously. The dog was bandaged from the Black Pines firefight, but his posture remained firm, amber eyes sharp with unwavering resolve. He sensed Marcus's tension and mirrored it, as he always did. "We end this," Marcus whispered, "on our terms." The storm answered with a clap of thunder. Marcus moved down the trail toward the hidden service road that led up to the Crow estate. Shadow followed, his steps silent despite the snow. They traveled quickly, cutting through the blizzard. The further they climbed, the louder the wind roared, as if warning them to turn back. Marcus ignored it. He had ignored worse on far deadlier nights. His breath steamed in short, controlled bursts. His thoughts were razor-focused. Crowd control, entry points, altitude, storm advantages, structural vulnerabilities of the estate. Elias Crow's arrogance would be his weakness. Men like him always believed the world existed only to bow. Marcus had spent his life proving such men wrong. As they reached the side embankment, a dark shape moved through the snow ahead. Marcus signaled Shadow to halt. A figure lumbered down the path, a man in a heavy parka, thick boots crunching ice beneath him. When he came closer, Marcus saw a square-jawed face with coarse stubble covering weathered skin. His nose was crooked, likely broken more than once. The man's eyes, a washed-out blue, roamed the woods with the disinterest of someone performing routine patrol. A mercenary, early 40s, burn scars along the jawline, likely ex-private contractor, and dangerous. Marcus crouched low, circling silently through the brush while Shadow crawled along the opposite flank, perfectly synchronized. The mercenary stopped suddenly, frowning. "What the hell?" Marcus lunged, an arm snaking around the man's throat, while his other hand trapped the wrist, reaching for the holstered handgun. The man struggled, boots slipping in the snow, breath rasping against Marcus's forearm. "Quiet!" Marcus growled. The man bucked violently, but Marcus tightened the choke until the mercenary's eyes rolled back. He collapsed into Marcus's arms. Marcus dragged him into the shadows, checking for radios, weapons, and identification. None. Crow kept his operations off the books. That was expected. "One down," Marcus murmured. "We keep moving." Shadow's breath puffed in the cold as he trotted beside Marcus up the incline. At the top, the front entrance of the estate came into view. 2 steel doors, tall and imposing, guarded by 4 armed men wearing black tactical gear and insulated jackets. Their weapons gleamed even in the storm's darkness. High-caliber rifles, silencers attached. A 5th guard stood closer to the door, his posture upright, alert. His hair was shaved on the sides, leaving a spiked strip down the center of his skull. His face was narrow and angular, with a thin white scar running from his right cheek to the jawline. He held a radio in one hand, scanning the grounds with restless eyes. Shadow growled low, recognizing hostility. Marcus assessed quickly. Direct confrontation was suicide. The storm gave him cover, but not enough. His gaze shifted to the east side, an external ventilation duct partially hidden behind a drift of snow. Large enough for a man, old enough to suggest the mansion's ventilation was upgraded but not sealed. Perfect. Marcus signaled Shadow and slid toward the duct, pulling a multi-tool from his pack. With practiced efficiency, he unscrewed the panel, slid inside, and motioned for Shadow to follow. The dog obeyed instantly, squeezing through the opening with agile precision. Inside, warm air rushed through the duct, a shocking contrast to the frigid blizzard outside. Marcus moved forward carefully, his weight distributed so the metal wouldn't creak. Shadow crawled ahead, navigating the narrow path like a ghost. Voices echoed faintly from the vents, men talking, laughter, the clinking of glasses. Crow was celebrating. He expected victory. Marcus reached a junction and peered through the grate. Below, in a lavish study with glass walls overlooking the storm, Elias Crow stood at a marble bar, pouring whiskey into crystal glasses. Crow was tall, mid-50s, broad in the shoulders but softened by wealth. His hair was salt and pepper, slicked neatly back. His skin was pale, almost unblemished, except for faint stress lines near the eyes. He wore a black wool suit, tailored to fit a man who believed himself untouchable. His expression held the calm smugness of someone who had monetized fear. 2 bodyguards flanked him, one heavy-set with tattooed forearms, the other younger, clean-shaven with nervous eyes and a rifle held too tightly. Crow's voice carried across the room with aristocratic ease. "Tonight marks the purification of Raven Ridge," he declared, raising his glass. "Tomorrow, this land becomes mine in full, a new beginning built on the ashes of decay." Marcus's blood simmered. He listened as Crow continued. "The charges are placed. The detonator sinks at midnight. Our little gas leak will be the tragedy no one ever saw coming." He set the whiskey down, turning to look out the panoramic window at the faint glow of the town below. "Let the storm cover our victory." Marcus withdrew, adrenaline burning through him with cold clarity. Midnight. They had one chance to stop him. He moved to the next vent, following the direction of the security hall. A guard passed under him, a younger man with dark hair, sharp cheekbones, and thin eyebrows. He walked with a slight limp, likely from an old injury. His eyes darted nervously. He wasn't hardened, just desperate for money. Marcus climbed down silently, landing behind the man. Before the guard could turn, Marcus seized him from behind, covering his mouth. "Sleep," Marcus whispered. The guard slumped. Marcus dragged him into a storage room and stripped his radio. He checked his watch. 11:42 p.m. 18 minutes. He and Shadow moved through the back corridors until they reached the rooftop access stairwell. The wind howled through the vents, carrying the distant thrum of helicopter blades. Marcus stiffened. "He's preparing to leave," he muttered. They ascended quickly. The rooftop was a battlefield of snow and wind. A sleek black helicopter sat on the landing pad, rotors chopping fiercely through the blizzard. A pilot in heavy gear stood beside it, tall, gaunt-faced, with a square jaw and thick eyebrows. His nose was slightly bent, evidence of past violence. His eyes were cold, efficient. Marcus moved like a shadow across the roof, sweeping low behind ventilation units. The pilot turned, scanning the rooftop. But Shadow seized the moment. With a single calculated leap, he tackled the man from the side, knocking him into the snow. Marcus rushed forward and struck the man across the temple with the butt of a pistol, rendering him immobile. Elias Crow burst onto the rooftop, fury twisting his elegant features. Behind him, 2 guards rushed out, weapons raised. "Hail!" Crow spat, voice sharp with disbelief. "You just don't know when to die." Marcus fired 2 quick shots, non-lethal but crippling, sending the guards crashing into the rooftop framing. Crow stumbled backward, clutching a small black device in his hand, the detonator. "It's over!" Marcus shouted through the wind. Crow snarled. "You're too late." He pressed a button. A timer activated on the device, bright red digits glowing malevolently. 0.13. The chopper's rotor intensified as Crow sprinted toward it. Marcus lunged. The storm roared. Snow blinded him. Shadow burst ahead, racing toward Crow with astonishing speed despite his injuries. Crow swung his arm wildly, striking Shadow across the muzzle with the metal detonator. The dog yelped but did not fall. Marcus collided with Crow in a violent crash, tackling him away from the helicopter and slamming him onto the icy deck. They rolled across the rooftop, fists flying. Crow fought like a man intoxicated by desperation, swinging wildly, but Marcus was precision, forged by war. With one clean strike to the jaw, he stunned Crow, knocking him breathless. Marcus ripped the detonator from his hand. 0.07. His fingers flew across the buttons. 0.05. He twisted off the panel, exposing the internal wires. 0.04. Shadow barked sharply, the storm swallowing the sound. 0.03. Marcus cut the power wire. 0.02. The timer froze. Crow screamed. Marcus stood slowly, chest heaving. "Raven Ridge isn't yours," he said coldly. Crow lunged, but Marcus turned and delivered a single punch that sent the man sprawling into the snow. The storm howled as if sealing Crow's fall. Shadow limped to Marcus's side, pressing his head against Marcus's leg. Marcus knelt, cupping the dog's jaw gently. "You did good," he whispered. In the distance, the lights of Raven Ridge flickered, alive, safe, for now. Marcus strapped Crow's hands with zip ties taken from a fallen guard. Backup would come. Justice would come. The storm eased as Marcus and Shadow stood at the rooftop's edge, looking down at the town they had saved. And for the first time since returning home, Marcus felt the weight inside his chest lift. Not completely, but enough to breathe. The storm that had haunted the night was gone by morning, leaving behind a sky washed clean and pale as new linen. Raven Ridge sat beneath it in fragile stillness, unsure whether to fear the silence or embrace it. For the first time in many months, the air didn't feel heavy. It felt expectant, as though the entire valley was holding its breath, waiting for something to shift, something good. Marcus Hale stood outside the makeshift command post established near the sheriff's station, the morning sunlight turning the frost on the ground into glittering shards. He wore a heavy field jacket borrowed from one of the deputies who had not been corrupt. The jacket fit him awkwardly across the shoulders, too narrow for a man who had spent his life training muscle into steel. His hair was tousled from a night with no rest. His eyes rimmed with exhaustion, yet sharper than ever. They held the same fierce steadiness that had guided him through ambushes, deserts, storms, and the rooftop battle that ended Elias Crow's grip on the town. Shadow lay at his feet, wrapped in clean bandages now, his fur brushed out by the local veterinarian who had rushed over before dawn. The dog's breathing was even, his posture relaxed, though the sharp vigilance in his amber eyes had not faded. Every tremor in the ground, every shift in wind, every footstep within 50 feet still drew his attention. Shadow would always be a warrior, scarred, alert, loyal beyond reason. "Good boy," Marcus murmured, kneeling to rub the fur behind Shadow's ears. Shadow leaned into the touch with quiet gratitude. The rhythmic pressure calmed Marcus's heartbeat in a way no medication or therapy ever had. Footsteps approached across the frost. Marcus looked up to see Deputy Sarah Whitlock, one of the few uncorrupted officers left. She was in her early 30s, tall and broad-shouldered with an athlete's build. Her hair was dark blonde, tied in a low ponytail, and her skin held a faint olive undertone. She carried herself with the stiff control of someone who had once been confident in the law, but had watched that law crumble under corruption. The collapse of the department had carved a hardness into her features, but today relief softened her eyes. "Hail," she said, offering a respectful nod. "We've got confirmation. Crow and his men are being transported to the federal holding facility. They won't be seeing daylight for a long time." Marcus nodded, though a part of him remained cautious. Men like Crow had a way of slipping through cracks, but the evidence Marcus had collected was comprehensive. Documents, recordings, testimonies from those Crow had threatened or bribed. Even a powerful man couldn't escape the sheer weight of truth. "Good," Marcus said simply. Sarah studied him with an expression hovering between gratitude and concern. "And you? How are you holding up?" Marcus considered the question. How could he sum up everything he felt? The remnants of adrenaline still twitching through his veins, the lingering echoes of the rooftop fight replaying in fragments, the guilt that always followed survival. But beneath all of it, something new, something almost unfamiliar. Hope. "I'm fine," Marcus answered. Sarah smirked slightly. "You've got the least convincing 'I'm fine' I've ever heard." A small, reluctant smile tugged at Marcus's mouth. "I'll survive." "I don't doubt that." Sarah exhaled, her breath fogging in the cold air. "I want you to know, on behalf of the town, we owe you more than we can ever repay. You stopped him. You saved us." Marcus shook his head. "I didn't do it alone." His gaze drifted to Shadow. The dog thumped his tail against the ground. Sarah's eyes softened. "And the kid, Tommy, doctors say he's going to be all right. His mother hasn't stopped crying since they found him. She keeps asking to thank you." Marcus's jaw tightened at the memory of the terrified boy tied to a stump in the woods. "He doesn't need to thank me. Just let him be a kid again." "He will," Sarah said gently. "Because of you." Marcus didn't reply. Compliments had always felt misplaced on him. The military had taught him to measure success only by survival and mission completion. Praise only reminded him of those he could not save. But Sarah didn't push the subject. She simply nodded and returned to her duties, leaving Marcus and Shadow in the golden morning. A faint whistle drifted from the road behind him. Marcus turned to see Lena Carver, the diner waitress with tired eyes but a heart too stubborn to break, walking toward them. She wore a long brown coat over her uniform, her auburn hair pulled into a neater bun today. In daylight, the creases of worry along her forehead seemed gentler, as though the sun had smoothed them. She held a paper bag in her hands. "I figured you hadn't eaten," she said with a soft smile. Marcus stood. "You didn't have to." "I know, but I wanted to." She handed him the bag. Inside were 2 breakfast sandwiches wrapped in wax paper and a thermos of fresh coffee. "The first good batch I've made in months," she added proudly. Shadow sniffed the bag with interest, tail wagging faintly. Lena chuckled. "There's a sausage roll in there just for him." Marcus's chest warmed unexpectedly. "Thank you?" She squeezed his arm once, briefly, gently, but enough to convey an emotion heavier than gratitude. "We're safe now," she whispered, "because you came home." Home. Marcus hadn't used that word for Raven Ridge in a long time, but today... Maybe the meaning was shifting. Lena stepped back, offering a final smile before returning to the diner to reopen it for the first time since Crow's downfall. Marcus and Shadow continued walking toward the ridge where the sun was rising, painting the sky in warm gold. They found a quiet spot overlooking the town. Marcus sat on a fallen log, while Shadow flopped down beside him. The dog rested his head on Marcus's boot, sighing deeply. The sound filled Marcus with a strange peace. They watched as residents emerged cautiously from their homes. People hugged their children. Elderly neighbors stood on porches, blinking at the sunlight like it was a miracle. Workers began sweeping debris from the streets. The town was not healed, but it was breathing again. Marcus felt a weight lift from his chest as he took it all in. He had spent so long carrying the memories of his fallen teammates that he forgot what it felt like to save lives instead of losing them. Shadow nudged his thigh, reminding him that victories, too, deserve to be remembered. "You ready to go home, boy?" Marcus asked quietly. Shadow gazed up at him, ears twitching. Marcus ruffled his fur before reaching into his jacket to unfold a small envelope. His orders. He was due back to his unit in 2 weeks. Duty called. It always did. But this time, the call didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a promise to return stronger, lighter, with purpose renewed. Later that afternoon, townspeople gathered outside the sheriff's station to see Marcus off. Word had spread fast through Raven Ridge, and by sunset, nearly every resident had appeared. Marcus had never liked crowds, but this one felt different, genuine, safe. Tommy, the boy he had rescued, stood near the front, wrapped in a blue winter coat that dwarfed his small frame. His mother, a woman in her late 30s with dark wavy hair and warm brown eyes, held his shoulder gently. She stepped forward. "Thank you," she said softly. Her voice trembled with emotion. "You brought my son back to me. I'll never be able to repay you." Marcus shook his head. "Just take care of him." Tommy grinned shyly and extended a small drawing. Marcus took it carefully. The picture showed a tall man with broad shoulders standing beside a dog with big ears. Above them was scribbled in crooked letters, "My heroes." Marcus blinked against a sudden sting in his eyes. He cleared his throat. "Thank you, Tommy." The bus that would take Marcus to the nearest military base rolled up, its engine humming steadily. A light snow had begun to fall again, though this time it seemed gentler, more like a blessing than a threat. Marcus crouched beside Shadow. The dog stared at him with unwavering loyalty, tail sweeping softly across the ground. "You can't come this time," Marcus whispered, stroking the dog's muzzle. "Orders are orders, but I'll be back for you." Shadow's posture straightened as if he understood every word. Marcus leaned closer. "Wait for me. When I'm done, I'm coming home. Here, to you." He pressed his forehead gently against Shadow's. A moment passed that felt like eternity, and goodbye, all woven into one. When Marcus finally stood, Shadow whimpered once. A soft, aching sound Marcus had never heard from him before. It nearly broke him. He forced himself to turn toward the bus. The townspeople stepped back respectfully as he boarded. The door closed with a quiet hiss. Through the window, Marcus watched Shadow sit in the snow, tail curled around his paws, staring up at him with fierce devotion. The engine rumbled. The bus pulled away. The town slowly disappeared behind the drifting flakes. But Marcus carried it with him. Every face, every breath of hope that had returned to Raven Ridge because he chose to fight. For the first time in years, he felt the path ahead wasn't leading him to war. It was leading him home. And the dawn rising behind the bus cast the entire valley in gold, as if blessing the promise he had made. He would return. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't arrive with thunder or blinding light. Sometimes they come quietly, in the form of a man who refuses to give up, a loyal dog who stands his ground, or a small town that chooses hope over fear. Stories like Marcus and Shadow's remind us that even in our darkest hours, there is always a force working in the background. Something bigger than danger, stronger than despair. Call it fate, call it courage, or call it God's gentle hand guiding those who dare to protect what is good. And just like Raven Ridge, our own lives hold battles no one else sees. We face storms at work, heartbreak at home, moments when the world feels too heavy. But miracles still happen. In the kindness of a stranger, in a second chance we didn't expect, in the strength we discover when we thought we had none left. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment about the miracles you've witnessed and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story of courage, faith, and redemption. May God bless everyone watching this, protect your families, strengthen your steps, and surround you with loyal hearts, just like Shadow. And if you believe he still sends heroes into our lives when we need them most, write Amen in the comments below.